Hello everyone, welcome back to Buried Files. Tonight we venture into the endless stretches of American highways where 8 new disturbing true horror stories have emerged from the asphalt wilderness. These are not folklore whispered around truck stop counters or sensationalized tales crafted for entertainment. Instead, we present first-hand testimonies of terror that have been rigorously documented through police incident reports, emergency dispatch recordings, and medical records from trauma centers across the interstate system. Each narrative comes directly from survivors who trusted the open road, only to discover that the most dangerous predators hunt where civilization ends and the highway stretches into darkness. From the desolate truck stops of Route 66 to the fog-shrouded mountain passes of Interstate 70, and from the endless cornfields of the Midwest to the ghost towns scattered along forgotten state routes, these accounts reveal the terrifying reality that lurks between destinations. The testimonies you will hear tonight have been compiled through extensive interviews with survivors, collaboration with highway patrol units, and careful analysis of missing persons cases that span multiple states. To protect those brave enough to share their experiences, certain identifying details have been carefully modified while preserving the chilling authenticity of each encounter. If you are new to our archive of buried horrors, make sure to subscribe to Buried Files for authentic horror content that exposes the darkness hiding in plain sight across America. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when we unearth another buried file from the shadows of reality. My name is David and I am from Oregon. The incident I am about to share with you happened during what should have been a wonderful family vacation 5 years ago. My wife Sarah and I had planned a road trip with our 2 children, Emma, who was 8 years old at the time, and Jake, who was 6. We were driving from Portland to visit Sarah's parents in Salt Lake City, taking the scenic route through Idaho on Interstate 84. Sarah and I had been looking forward to this trip for months. We rarely got the chance to take extended vacations due to our work schedules, and the kids were at perfect ages to appreciate the adventure of a cross-country road trip. We had packed our Honda Odyssey with snacks, games, and entertainment systems to keep Emma and Jake occupied during the long drive. The first day of travel went exactly as planned. We made good time through the Columbia River Gorge and into Idaho, stopping at a few scenic overlooks to let the kids stretch their legs and take pictures. Emma and Jake were being surprisingly well behaved for such a long car ride, and Sarah and I were feeling optimistic about the remainder of our journey. It was on the second day, somewhere between Boise and Twin Falls, that we first encountered the van that would turn our family vacation into a nightmare. I first noticed it when we stopped for lunch at a roadside restaurant in a small Idaho town whose name I cannot even remember now. The van was parked across the street from the restaurant, and I only paid attention to it because it was an unusual vehicle. An older model Dodge van painted an ugly shade of brown with tinted windows that made it impossible to see inside. What caught my attention initially was not the van itself, but the fact that someone appeared to be sitting in the driver's seat even though the engine was not running. I could make out the silhouette of a person behind the wheel, but the tinted windows made it impossible to see any details about who was inside. After our lunch, we loaded the family back into the Honda and continued down the highway. About an hour later, I noticed the brown van again in my rearview mirror. It was maintaining a consistent distance behind us, perhaps 6 or 7 car lengths back. At first, I assumed it was just coincidence. After all, Interstate 84 is a major highway, and it made sense that other vehicles would be traveling in the same direction we were. But as the miles passed, the van remained behind us at exactly the same distance. When I sped up slightly to test my suspicions, the van sped up as well. When I slowed down, it slowed down. When we took an exit to stop for gas, the van took the same exit and pulled into a parking spot across the street from the gas station. I pointed out the van to Sarah, and she initially tried to convince me that I was being paranoid. She suggested that the driver was probably just traveling to the same general area we were, and that it was natural for vehicles to end up following each other on long stretches of highway. But when we left the gas station and merged back onto the interstate, the brown van pulled out behind us and resumed its position 6 car lengths back. By this point, I was becoming genuinely concerned about our family's safety. Over the next 100 miles, I experimented with different driving patterns to see if the van would continue following us. I changed lanes frequently, varied my speed, and took an unnecessary exit just to see what would happen. Every single time, the van mirrored our movements exactly. When we took the unnecessary exit, the van followed us down the off-ramp and through a small town before following us back to the highway. There was no longer any doubt in my mind that we were being deliberately followed. Sarah was now sharing my concerns, but we tried not to alarm Emma and Jake. We told them we were playing a game to see if we could spot interesting vehicles on the highway, and we asked them to help us keep an eye on the brown van with the dark windows. Emma, being the older and more observant of our children, immediately spotted the van and asked why it was always behind us. I told her that some people just happened to be going to the same places we were, but I could tell she was starting to sense that something was wrong. As we approached Twin Falls, I decided to take decisive action. Instead of continuing straight on the interstate as we had planned, I took an exit that led to a large truck stop and travel plaza. My plan was to see if the van would follow us, and if it did, I would go inside and call the police. The van followed us into the truck stop parking lot, but instead of parking nearby, it drove to the far end of the lot and positioned itself where the driver would have a clear view of our vehicle. I told Sarah to take the kids inside the travel plaza and buy them snacks while I stayed with the car to observe the van. After Sarah and the children went inside, I pretended to be checking something under the hood of our Honda while actually watching the van. For about 10 minutes, nothing happened. Then the driver's door of the van opened and a man stepped out. He was tall and thin, probably in his 40s, with unkempt hair and clothing that looked like it had not been washed in days. What alarmed me most was that he immediately began walking directly toward our vehicle, pulling something out of his jacket pocket as he approached. I quickly got into the driver's seat and locked all the doors. As the man got closer, I could see that what he had pulled from his pocket was a camera, and he was taking pictures of our license plate, our vehicle, and even of me sitting in the driver's seat. When he realized I was watching him, he did not try to hide what he was doing. Instead, he walked right up to my driver's side window and started taking pictures of me through the glass. He was close enough that I could see his face clearly, and what I saw there was deeply disturbing. He was smiling, but it was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who enjoyed frightening other people. I started the engine and backed out of the parking space, but the man did not move away from the car. He continued taking pictures as I maneuvered around him, and he followed our vehicle on foot as I drove toward the travel plaza entrance to pick up my family. When Sarah emerged from the building with Emma and Jake, I quickly explained what had happened. The man was still visible in the parking lot, now standing next to his van and continuing to take pictures of us with a telephoto camera lens. Sarah immediately understood the seriousness of the situation. We loaded the children into the car as quickly as possible, and I drove straight to the truck stop's management office. The manager, a middle-aged woman named Janet, listened to our story with obvious concern and immediately called the local sheriff's department. While we waited for the police to arrive, Janet told us that this was not the first time they had received reports about the brown van and its driver. According to her, there had been at least 3 other incidents over the past 6 months where families traveling with children had reported being followed by the same vehicle. She also revealed something that made my blood run cold. 2 of those families had reported that after their encounters with the van, they had discovered evidence that their hotel rooms had been broken into during the night, though nothing had been stolen. The intruder had apparently gone through their belongings and taken photographs of personal items, including the children's clothes and toys. When the sheriff's deputies arrived, they immediately recognized my description of the van and its driver. Deputy Martinez told us that the man was a registered sex offender named Thomas Kellner, who had recently been released from prison after serving 8 years for attempted kidnapping. The deputies explained that Kellner had been targeting families with young children, following them for hundreds of miles while photographing them and learning their routines. His apparent goal was to identify families who would be staying overnight at motels, then break into their rooms while they slept. According to Deputy Martinez, Kellner's method was to follow families until they stopped for the night, then wait several hours before attempting to enter their motel rooms. He would photograph the children and their belongings, and in at least 2 cases, he had attempted to abduct children from their beds while their parents slept. The deputies immediately put out an alert for Kellner's van, and within 2 hours he was apprehended at a rest area about 50 miles down the highway. When they searched his vehicle, they found hundreds of photographs of families with children, detailed notes about travel patterns and motel stops, and what appeared to be a kidnapping kit including zip ties, duct, tape, and sedatives. The investigation revealed that Kellner had been operating this stalking scheme for months, targeting families on major interstate highways throughout the Mountain West. He had compiled detailed files on dozens of families, tracking their movements and photographing their children without their knowledge. Most disturbing of all, the police found evidence that Kellner had successfully entered the motel rooms of at least 6 families over the previous 4 months. In each case, he had photographed the sleeping children and stolen personal items as souvenirs. The families had never known they had been victimized because Kellner was careful not to wake anyone or leave obvious signs of his presence. Kellner was charged with multiple felonies, including stalking, burglary, possession of child pornography, and attempted kidnapping. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and he eventually pleaded guilty to avoid a trial. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. The experience fundamentally changed how our family approaches travel and personal safety. We no longer stay at roadside motels, instead choosing established hotel chains with better security measures. We vary our travel routes and timing to avoid predictable patterns, and we always inform family members of our exact itinerary and expected arrival times. Most importantly, we taught Emma and Jake about situational awareness and the importance of immediately reporting anything that makes them feel uncomfortable or unsafe. The incident showed us how vulnerable families can be when traveling, and how predators can exploit the routines and patterns of highway travel. I still think about that brown van whenever we take family road trips. The knowledge that Thomas Kellner had been watching our children and planning to harm them is something that will stay with me forever. But I am grateful that we recognized the danger in time and that our family remained safe. The investigation into Kellner's activities revealed that dozens of other families had been victimized without ever knowing it. Our willingness to report the stalking behavior and take immediate action may have prevented him from harming other children. And for that reason, I encourage any travelers who notice suspicious behavior to trust their instincts and contact law enforcement immediately. Evil exists in this world, and sometimes it follows families down dark highways, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. But awareness, caution, and quick action can make the difference between a close call and an unthinkable tragedy. My name is Marcus, and I am from Denver, Colorado. What I am about to share with you happened 3 years ago during what should have been a simple road trip to visit my college buddies in Phoenix. I have replayed this nightmare in my head countless times, and I still get chills whenever I drive past that stretch of highway where my life nearly ended. It was late October, and I had finally gotten some time off from my job at a local marketing firm. My college friends had been planning a reunion weekend in Phoenix for months, and I was excited to see everyone again. We had all graduated 5 years earlier and scattered across the country, so opportunities like this were rare. Rather than fly, I decided to make a road trip out of it. The drive from Denver to Phoenix is about 12 hours, and I figured I could make good time driving through the night to avoid the heavy traffic during the day. I left Denver around 10 in the evening, planning to arrive in Phoenix by mid-morning. The weather was perfect for a night drive, clear skies with no wind, and my car was running beautifully. I had just gotten my Honda Civic serviced the week before, so I felt confident about making the journey without any mechanical issues. I loaded up on energy drinks and snacks, created the perfect playlist, and hit the road feeling optimistic about the adventure ahead. The first few hours went exactly as planned. I made good time through Colorado Springs and Pueblo, then crossed into New Mexico without incident. The highway was relatively empty, just the occasional semi-truck and a few other night travelers like myself. I was making excellent time and felt wide awake despite the late hour. Everything was going perfectly until I reached that desolate stretch of Interstate 25 between Las Vegas, New Mexico, and Albuquerque. It was around 2 in the morning when I first saw him. A lone figure standing beside a broken-down sedan on the shoulder of the highway, illuminated by my headlights as I approached. He was waving his arms frantically, clearly in distress. As someone who has been helped by strangers before, I have always believed in paying it forward when possible. Despite the late hour and remote location, something inside me compelled me to pull over and offer assistance. The man appeared to be in his 40s, average height and build, wearing jeans and a dark jacket. His car, an older model Toyota Camry, sat with its hood up and hazard lights blinking weakly. As I rolled down my window, he approached with what seemed like genuine relief and gratitude. "Thank God someone stopped," he said, his voice carrying a slight southern accent. "My car just died on me about 20 minutes ago. The engine just cut out completely. I do not have cell service out here, and I was starting to worry I would be stuck until morning." I looked around at the empty highway stretching endlessly in both directions. The nearest town was at least 30 miles away, and there was nothing but darkness and desert surrounding us. I felt genuinely sorry for the guy and knew how helpless I would feel in his situation. "I am heading to Phoenix," I told him. "I can give you a ride to the next town where you can call for a tow truck or find a hotel for the night." His face lit up with apparent appreciation. "That would be incredible, thank you so much. I am actually heading to Phoenix too, believe it or not. I have business there in the morning, so this is perfect timing." Something about his immediate mention of Phoenix seemed oddly convenient, but I brushed off the feeling as paranoid thinking brought on by the late hour and isolated location. People travel to Phoenix all the time, especially for business. It was not that unusual of a coincidence. He grabbed a small duffel bag from his car and climbed into my passenger seat. As we pulled back onto the highway, I tried to make polite conversation to help pass the time and keep myself alert for the remaining drive. "So what kind of business brings you to Phoenix?" I asked casually. "Sales," he replied simply. "I travel around the Southwest meeting with clients. What about you?" "Just visiting some college friends for a reunion weekend. We all went to Arizona State together." That was when things started to feel wrong. His response was too quick, too specific. "Arizona State, interesting. What did you study there?" I had not mentioned Arizona State. I had only said college friends in Phoenix. The realization hit me like a cold wave, but I tried to stay calm and not let my growing unease show. "Business marketing," I answered, watching his reaction carefully. "Makes sense. I bet you and your friends had some great times in Tempe. That area around campus can get pretty wild on weekends." Again, I had never mentioned Tempe or anything about the campus area. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as my mind raced through possible explanations. Maybe he just made educated guesses based on Phoenix and college friends. Arizona State was the largest university in the area, after all. But then he continued talking, and every word made my blood run colder. I bet you guys spent a lot of time at that sports bar on Mill Avenue. What was it called? Oh right, you probably went to Marley's a lot too. Great wings there. I had never mentioned Mill Avenue, and Marley's had been our regular hangout spot during college. It was not some famous establishment that everyone knew about. It was just a local place near campus that we frequented because they had cheap beer and decent food. How do you know about Marley's? I asked directly, no longer trying to hide my suspicion. He was quiet for a moment, and I could feel his eyes studying my profile in the darkness. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost all pretense of friendliness. I know a lot of things about you, Marcus. More than you might expect. The use of my name sent ice through my veins. I had never introduced myself. I had been careful not to mention my name during our entire conversation. My mind immediately went to the worst possibilities. Was this some kind of setup? Had he been waiting for me specifically? How do you know my name? I demanded, my voice coming out shakier than I intended. Instead of answering, he reached into his duffel bag and pulled out a manila folder. Even in the dim light from the dashboard, I could see it was thick with papers and photographs. He opened it and began laying items on his lap where I could see them. Marcus Thompson, age 27, graduated from Arizona State in 2022 with a degree in marketing. Currently employed at Pinnacle Marketing Solutions in Denver. Lives alone in an apartment on Colfax Avenue. My throat went completely dry. Everything he said was accurate down to my address and employer, but it got worse. He continued pulling out photographs, pictures of me leaving my apartment building, walking to my car, even sitting at my desk at work. They appeared to have been taken over several weeks or months. Some were clearly taken with a telephoto lens from a significant distance. You take the same route to work every morning. You stop at the Starbucks on 16th Street exactly 3 days a week. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You order a large coffee, black with 1 sugar. You typically arrive at work between 8:15 and 8:30. I realized I was gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles had turned white. This was not a random encounter. This man had been stalking me, studying my habits, learning my routines. But why? And how had he known I would be on this highway at this exact time? You posted on Instagram 2 weeks ago about your upcoming trip to Phoenix, he said, as if reading my thoughts. You mentioned leaving Friday night to beat the traffic. Your privacy settings are not as secure as you think they are. The full horror of my situation began to dawn on me. This was not a stranded motorist I had helped out of kindness. This was a predator who had orchestrated this entire encounter. He had probably disabled his own car and waited for me to drive by, knowing my route and approximate timing from my social media posts. What do you want from me? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady while my mind raced through possible escape options. That depends entirely on how cooperative you are willing to be, he replied calmly. You see, Marcus, you fit a very specific profile that I have been looking for. Young professional, lives alone, limited family contact, predictable habits. Someone who would not be missed immediately if they disappeared for a while. The phrase "for a while" was particularly chilling. It implied this was not necessarily a kidnapping with the intent to kill, but something potentially worse. Prolonged captivity for some unknown purpose. I glanced at the speedometer and realized I was still doing 75 miles per hour down a dark, empty highway with a dangerous stranger in my passenger seat. My phone was in the cup holder between us, but he would see any attempt to reach for it. Even if I could call for help, we were in the middle of nowhere with no specific location to give emergency services. "The next exit is in 12 miles, he said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. "You are going to take that exit and follow my directions from there." I knew that if I allowed him to direct me off the highway to some secondary location, my chances of survival would drop to nearly zero. Whatever he had planned required privacy and isolation. I had to act while we were still on the interstate, where there was at least a possibility of other travelers or police patrols. My mind went through every option I could think of. I could try to crash the car deliberately, hoping to survive while incapacitating him. I could attempt to fight him while driving, though that would likely result in a fatal accident. I could try to attract attention by driving erratically or honking the horn, but there were no other vehicles visible in either direction. Then I remembered something that gave me hope. About 15 miles ahead was a travel plaza, a large truck stop with gas stations, restaurants, and hopefully people even at this hour. If I could make it there without him realizing my intention, I might have a chance to escape or call for help. "You know what?" I said, trying to sound resigned and cooperative. "I think I understand what this is about. You are right that I would not be missed right away. My friends in Phoenix are not expecting me until tomorrow afternoon, and I live alone, like you said." I was hoping to buy time and make him think I was accepting the situation. Meanwhile, I was calculating distance and time to reach the travel plaza. At our current speed, I had maybe 10 minutes before we reached the exit he mentioned, and the truck stop should be just a few miles beyond that. "Smart man," he said approvingly. "This will go much easier if you do not try to be a hero." But as we approached the exit ramp, I could see the glow of lights ahead, the travel plaza I had been hoping for. It appeared to be busy with several semi-trucks parked in the lot and multiple vehicles at the gas pumps. This was my chance. Instead of slowing for the exit, I accelerated and flew past it at nearly 80 miles per hour, heading directly for the truck stop. My passenger immediately realized what was happening. "What are you doing?" he shouted. "I told you to take that exit." "Change of plans," I replied, pressing the accelerator to the floor. He lunged for the steering wheel, but I was ready for that reaction. I grabbed his wrist with my right hand while steering with my left, and we struggled briefly before I managed to pull into the truck stop parking lot. I was honking the horn continuously and flashing my lights, trying to attract as much attention as possible. Till at the moment I stopped the car, I jumped out and started yelling for help. Several truckers immediately came running over, and within minutes we had called 911. My passenger had initially tried to follow me out of the car, but when he saw the crowd gathering, he retreated back to the vehicle. When the police arrived 20 minutes later, they found detailed surveillance files on not just me, but dozens of other potential victims. The man was wanted in connection with several missing persons cases across multiple states. His method was always the same: extensive surveillance followed by staged encounters designed to look like coincidental meetings. I learned later that his car had not actually broken down. It was equipped with a kill switch that allowed him to disable it temporarily to create the appearance of mechanical failure. He would research his targets through social media, learn their travel plans, and position himself along their route at the optimal time and location. The investigation revealed that I was not his first intended victim from Colorado. 3 other young professionals had disappeared over the past 2 years under similar circumstances, and their cases remained unsolved. If I had not made it to that truck stop, I would have become the 4th. I still take road trips, but I have made significant changes to how I travel. I no longer post travel plans on social media. I vary my routes and timing, and I never pick up hitchhikers no matter how genuine their distress appears. Most importantly, I trust my instincts when something feels wrong. because that night taught me that predators are often far more sophisticated and patient than most people realize. The experience changed my perspective on random acts of kindness and personal safety. While I still believe in helping others when possible, I have learned that evil can disguise itself as vulnerability, and sometimes the person asking for help is actually the greatest danger you will ever encounter. My name is Jessica and I am from Michigan. 3 years ago, my boyfriend Derek and I made the decision to pack up our entire lives and move from Detroit to Seattle. Derek had landed his dream job at a tech startup, and I was ready for a change of scenery after spending my whole life in the Midwest. We decided to make the cross-country move an adventure by driving rather than flying and shipping our belongings separately. Derek had this old CB radio that his father had given him years earlier. It was a classic Cobra model from the 80s that still worked perfectly. Derek was fascinated by truckers and the whole CB culture, so he convinced me that we should install it in our Honda Pilot for the journey. His reasoning was that truckers would have the best information about road conditions, traffic jams, construction delays, and good places to stop for food and fuel. I was initially skeptical about the CB radio idea. It seemed old-fashioned and unnecessary when we had smartphones with GPS and traffic apps. But Derek was so excited about using it that I agreed to let him install it before we left Detroit. He spent an entire weekend running cables and mounting the radio and antenna, treating the whole project like he was building a spaceship. We left Detroit on a Thursday morning in early September, planning to take our time and make the drive over 4 days with overnight stops in interesting cities along the way. The first day took us through Illinois and into Iowa, and Derek was having a blast with the CB radio. He learned the trucker lingo quickly and was soon chatting with drivers about everything from weather conditions to the best truck stops for showers and meals. Initially, I found the CB radio chatter entertaining. The truckers had a whole culture and language of their own, and many of them were genuinely helpful and friendly. They warned us about speed traps, construction zones, and accidents ahead. Derek adopted the handle Motor City, and I became Detroit Lady in their conversations. Everything was perfectly normal until we reached Nebraska on the second day of our journey. That was when we first heard from the voice that would change everything about our trip. It was around 2 in the afternoon, and we were driving through a particularly desolate stretch of Interstate 80 when a clear, authoritative voice came through the CB radio speaker. "Motor City and Detroit Lady, this is Watchdog. You need to copy this message immediately." Derek and I looked at each other with surprise. No one had ever addressed us so directly and seriously on the CB before. The voice had an urgency that was unsettling. This is Motor City," Derek replied hesitantly. "Go ahead, Watchdog. You are currently driving a silver Honda Pilot with Michigan plates, license number starting with GK7. You have approximately 40 miles until you reach the Ogallala rest area. Do not stop there under any circumstances. Continue driving until you reach the truck stop in Big Springs. Do you copy?" My blood ran cold. This person, whoever they were, knew exactly what vehicle we were driving and had somehow read our license plate. Derek and I exchanged worried glances as he grabbed the CB microphone. "How do you know what car we are driving?" Derek asked, his voice showing the concern we both felt. "That is not important right now," Watchdog replied firmly. "What matters is that you follow my instructions exactly. Do not stop at the Ogallala rest area. There is a situation developing there that puts travelers at risk, particularly couples in late-model vehicles with out-of-state plates." I grabbed Derek's arm and whispered urgently, "Ask him what kind of situation." Derek keyed the microphone again. "What kind of situation are we talking about here, Watchdog?" There was a long pause before Watchdog responded. When he did speak again, his voice was even more serious than before. There are individuals at that rest area who target specific types of travelers. They work in teams to disable vehicles or create emergencies that strand people. Once travelers are vulnerable, they rob them and worse. I have been monitoring their communications, and your vehicle matches the profile they are looking for today. My hands were shaking as I processed this information. "Derek, we need to call the police," I whispered. But when Derek asked Watchdog if we should contact law enforcement, the response was not what we expected. Negative on contacting local authorities. "The situation is more complicated than you realize. Just trust me and avoid that rest area. I will continue to monitor your progress and provide updates as needed." As we approached the area Watchdog had warned us about, we could see the Ogallala rest area ahead. It looked completely normal from the highway, just a standard roadside facility with a few cars and trucks parked in the lot. But Derek and I had decided to trust Watchdog's warning, so we drove past without stopping. About 10 miles later, Watchdog's voice crackled through the CB again. "Motor City and Detroit lady, you made the right decision. I can confirm there were 3 individuals at that rest area who were waiting for your vehicle specifically. They had disabled the security cameras and positioned themselves to intercept you." "How could you possibly know all this?" Derek asked into the microphone. "I have my methods," Watchdog replied cryptically. "What matters now is keeping you safe for the remainder of your journey. You will encounter 2 more potentially dangerous situations before you reach Colorado." Over the next several hours, Watchdog continued to provide warnings and guidance. He told us to avoid a specific truck stop in Colorado where he claimed there was an active situation involving federal authorities. He warned us away from a seemingly innocent roadside diner where he said the owners were connected to human trafficking operations. Each time, his warnings seemed absurd and paranoid, but each time, when we drove past the locations he had flagged, something felt wrong. The truck stop he had warned us about was surrounded by more law enforcement vehicles than seemed normal. The roadside diner had several men in the parking lot who were clearly not customers, and they watched our vehicle intently as we drove by. As we continued into Colorado, I began to feel like we were being protected by some kind of guardian angel, even though the logical part of my mind questioned how any of this could be possible. How could someone track our location so precisely? How could they know about dangerous situations at specific locations along our route? On the 3rd day of our trip, as we drove through the Rocky Mountains, Watchdog provided his most chilling warning yet. "Motor City and Detroit lady, in approximately 15 miles, you will see a sedan pulled over on the side of the highway with its hood up. There will be a woman standing next to it who appears to be in distress. Do not stop to help her. This is a trap." "A trap?" Derek asked. "What kind of trap?" "The woman is not actually stranded. She is working with a team of men who are positioned out of sight. When Good Samaritans stop to help, the men emerge and force the victims into the mountains where they are never found. Colorado State Patrol has been investigating a series of disappearances along this stretch of highway, but they have not yet identified the pattern." Sure enough, exactly 15 miles later, we saw the broken-down sedan with a woman standing beside it waving for help. She looked genuinely distressed, and under normal circumstances, Derek and I would have definitely stopped. Instead, we drove past, both of us feeling guilty for not helping someone who appeared to need assistance. As we passed the scene, I looked in my side mirror and saw 2 men emerge from behind some rocks near the roadside. They appeared to be signaling to the woman by the car. My stomach dropped as I realized Watchdog had been absolutely correct again. "Watchdog, we just passed the scene you warned us about," Derek said into the CB microphone. "You were right. There were men hiding nearby." "I know," Watchdog replied simply. "You are safe now, but you need to maintain your current speed and do not stop until you reach Grand Junction." There is one more situation ahead. The final warning came as we approached the Utah border. Watchdog told us that there was a compromised way station where vehicles were being randomly selected for searches that resulted in planted evidence and extortion schemes. He directed us to take an alternate route that added an hour to our journey but avoided the problematic checkpoint entirely. By the time we reached Salt Lake City, Derek and I were completely dependent on Watchdog's guidance. We had witnessed enough evidence to convince us that his warnings were legitimate, even though we still had no idea who he was or how he was obtaining his information. As we prepared to leave Utah and enter Nevada for the final leg of our journey, Derek tried one more time to get information about our mysterious protector. Watchdog, we want to thank you for everything you have done to keep us safe. Can you tell us who you are? We would like to find a way to repay you for your help. The response took a long time to come, and when it did, Watchdog's voice sounded different somehow, more tired and sad than before. Motor City and Detroit lady, I am someone who was not as fortunate as you have been. I was traveling with my wife on this same route 2 years ago, and we did not have anyone to warn us about the dangers. We stopped at the wrong place and trusted the wrong people. My wife did not survive the encounter, and I was left permanently disabled. Derek and I sat in stunned silence as Watchdog continued. I monitor CB communications and track vehicles that match certain risk profiles because I do not want any other families to experience what happened to mine. I have prevented dozens of incidents over the past 2 years, but I can never bring back the person I lost. We are so sorry for your loss, Derek managed to say. Is there anything we can do to help you? Just reach your destination safely and remember to help others when you can. That is payment enough. We heard from Watchdog one final time as we entered Nevada. He confirmed that the remainder of our route was clear and wished us well in our new life in Seattle. After that, despite Derek's attempts to reach him, we never heard his voice on the CB radio again. Derek and I made it to Seattle safely and began our new life together. We never forgot about Watchdog and the mysterious protection he provided during our vulnerable journey across the country. We tried several times to research disappearances and incidents along Interstate 80 to see if we could verify the dangers he had warned us about, but we found very little concrete information. What we did find were scattered reports of missing persons cases, unsolved robberies, and suspicious activities at various locations along major interstate routes. While we could never prove that Watchdog's specific warnings were accurate, the pattern of incidents suggested that his concerns were legitimate. Derek kept the CB radio installed in our vehicle, and occasionally we would try to contact Watchdog to see if he was still out there protecting other travelers. We never heard from him again, but sometimes late at night, when we were driving on long trips, we would hear fragments of conversations that reminded us of his voice. I still think about Watchdog whenever Derek and I take road trips. There is something both comforting and unsettling about knowing that someone might be watching over travelers, protecting them from dangers they cannot see. But it also makes me aware of how vulnerable we all are when we venture into unfamiliar territory, trusting strangers and hoping for the best. The experience changed how Derek and I approach travel and personal safety. We are more cautious about where we stop, more aware of our surroundings, and more grateful for the protection we received during that journey. Most importantly, we try to help other travelers when we can, honoring Watchdog's memory and continuing the cycle of protection he started. My name is Amanda, and I am from Texas. What I am about to tell you happened 2 years ago during one of the most terrifying nights of my life. I still cannot drive alone at night without thinking about what occurred on that dark stretch of highway between Houston and Roswell, New Mexico. This experience challenged everything I thought I knew about reality And I am sharing it now because I believe others need to hear what can happen when the veil between worlds becomes thin on America's loneliest roads. My grandmother had been my closest companion throughout my entire life. She raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 7 years old, and she had been my constant source of love and wisdom for the past 20 years. When I received the call that she had suffered a massive stroke and was not expected to survive the night, I knew I had to get to her bedside in New Mexico as quickly as possible. It was already past 9 in the evening when I hung up the phone with the hospital staff, but I could not bear the thought of waiting until morning to begin the journey. My grandmother had always been there for me in my darkest moments, and I was determined to be there for her in what might be her final hours. The drive from Houston to Roswell normally takes about 8 hours, but I was hoping to make it in 7 by driving through the night and avoiding any unnecessary stops. I threw some clothes into an overnight bag, grabbed my purse and car keys, and headed out into the darkness. The first few hours of the drive were exactly what I expected. Interstate 20 took me west through the familiar landscape of East Texas, and I made good time despite the late hour. I had the radio playing softly and was using the drive to prepare myself emotionally for what I might find when I reached the hospital. It was somewhere around midnight after I had crossed into New Mexico and was driving through a particularly desolate stretch of highway between Roswell and Artesia that I first noticed something was wrong. I was adjusting my rearview mirror when I caught sight of a figure sitting in the back seat of my car. My immediate reaction was panic. I slammed on the brakes and pulled over to the shoulder of the highway, my heart pounding as I turned around to confront whoever had somehow gotten into my vehicle. But when I looked back at the rear seat, it was completely empty. I sat there for several minutes trying to rationalize what I had seen. I told myself that it must have been a trick of the light, or shadows from passing traffic, or just my imagination playing tricks on me due to stress and exhaustion. I had been driving for nearly 4 hours, and grief can do strange things to a person's perception. After checking that all my doors were locked and looking around the empty highway for any signs of other people, I convinced myself that I had imagined the whole thing. I pulled back onto the interstate and continued toward Roswell. But about 20 minutes later, I saw the figure again. This time, I was certain it was not my imagination. In my rearview mirror, I could clearly see the silhouette of an elderly woman sitting directly behind me in the back seat. She appeared to be wearing a dark dress or coat, and her gray hair was pulled back into a bun. I tried to remain calm and not take my eyes off the road, but every few seconds I would glance in the mirror to see if the figure was still there. Sometimes she was visible and sometimes the back seat appeared empty, but I could sense her presence even when I could not see her. What disturbed me most was not just that someone was apparently in my car, but that I felt no sense of immediate danger. If this had been an intruder or carjacker, I would have expected to feel threatened or frightened. Instead, I felt an odd sense of familiarity, as if the presence in my back seat was someone I should recognize. As the miles passed, the figure became more solid and visible. I began to make out details of her face and clothing that were impossible to ignore. She appeared to be in her 70s or 80s, with kind eyes and weathered hands that she kept folded in her lap. Her clothing looked old-fashioned, like something from several decades ago. The most unsettling moment came when I realized that the woman in my back seat was moving objects around the interior of my car. I watched in my rearview mirror as she picked up my cell phone from where I had placed it on the center console and examined it carefully before setting it back down. She opened my purse and looked through its contents, not as if she were searching for something specific, but more like she was trying to understand who I was. At one point, she picked up a photograph that I kept clipped to my sun visor. A picture of my grandmother and me taken at Christmas the previous year. The phantom woman studied the photograph for a long time, and I swear I saw her nod as if she recognized something or someone in the picture. By this time, I was convinced that I was either experiencing some kind of psychological breakdown or encountering something genuinely supernatural. Neither possibility was particularly comforting, but I was still several hours away from Roswell and had no choice but to continue driving. It was around 2:30 in the morning when the phantom woman finally spoke to me. Her voice came from directly behind my right ear, clear and unmistakable despite the impossibility of the situation. "You are Sarah's granddaughter," she said. It was not a question but a statement of recognition. I nearly drove off the road in shock. Sarah was my grandmother's name, but I had never mentioned it aloud during the entire drive, and the phantom woman could not have known this information through any normal means. "Yes," I managed to reply, my voice barely above a whisper. "How do you know my grandmother?" "I have been waiting for her for a very long time," the woman replied. "She was supposed to meet me many years ago, but she never came. I have been traveling this road ever since, looking for her." The implications of what she was telling me were beginning to sink in. Are you dead?" I asked. "I died in 1987, she confirmed matter-of-factly. "My name is Margaret Fletcher, and your grandmother and I were best friends when we were young women. We made a promise to each other that whoever died first would wait for the other before moving on. But Sarah never came to meet me, so I have been waiting on this highway where I died." My grandmother had indeed lived in New Mexico as a young woman before moving to Texas to marry my grandfather. She had mentioned a childhood friend named Margaret who had died in a car accident, but I had never heard the full story of their friendship. "My grandmother is dying tonight," I told the phantom. "That is where I am going, to the hospital in Roswell." Margaret was quiet for a long time before she responded. "Then perhaps it is time for both of us to complete our journey." For the remaining 2 hours of the drive, Margaret told me stories about her friendship with my grandmother. She described adventures they had shared as teenagers, dreams they had discussed about their futures, and the promise they had made to always be there for each other, even in death. As we approached Roswell, Margaret began to fade from view, becoming more and more translucent until I could barely see her outline in the rearview mirror. But her voice remained clear and comforting. "Tell Sarah that Margaret kept her promise," she said. "Tell her that I waited for her, and now we can go together." When I arrived at the hospital at dawn, I rushed to my grandmother's room expecting to find her unconscious and near death as the doctors had described. Instead, I found her awake and alert, with a peaceful expression on her face that I had never seen before. "Amanda, dear," she said when she saw me, "I am so glad you made it safely. I was worried about you driving alone at night on those dark highways." I sat down beside her bed and took her hand. "Grandmother, I have a message for you. Margaret says to tell you that she kept her promise and that she waited for you." My grandmother's eyes filled with tears and she squeezed my hand tightly. "You met Margaret? Oh, my dear child, that means it is time." She passed away peacefully that afternoon with me holding her hand and a smile on her face. The nurses said they had never seen someone transition so calmly and with such obvious peace. I have driven that same stretch of highway several times since my grandmother's death, but I have never again seen Margaret Fletcher or experienced anything supernatural. I believe that she fulfilled her promise to wait for my grandmother, and that both of them have now moved on to whatever comes after this life. The experience taught me that there are forces in this world that we do not understand, and that love and loyalty can transcend even death itself. On America's darkest highways, where the living travel through the night with their own urgent purposes, sometimes the dead are traveling too, keeping promises made long ago and waiting patiently for their time to continue their journey. I no longer fear driving alone at night because I know now that we are never truly alone on the road. Sometimes our guardian angels are people we have never met, spirits who choose to watch over the living because they understand the importance of reaching the people we love before it is too late. My name is Kevin and I am from Florida. The incident I am going to describe happened 3 years ago when I was 22 years old and had just graduated from the University of Florida with a degree in computer science. I had landed my first real job at a software company in San Diego, California, and I was excited to start this new chapter of my life. Instead of flying across the country, I decided to make the cross-country drive an adventure and take the scenic route through some of America's most beautiful landscapes. I had always been someone who enjoyed solitude and exploration, so the prospect of driving alone for several days through different states appealed to me. My plan was to take Interstate 10 west through Louisiana, Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona before cutting north to California. I wanted to see the desert Southwest and experience some of the small towns and local culture that you can only encounter when traveling by car. Everything went perfectly for the first 2 days of my journey. I made it through Louisiana and most of Texas without any problems, stopping overnight in small motels and eating at local diners where the food was authentic and the people were friendly. I was having exactly the kind of adventure I had hoped for when I planned this trip. It was on the 3rd day, somewhere between San Antonio and El Paso, that my car started making unusual noises. I was driving through a particularly remote stretch of highway when I began to hear a grinding sound coming from somewhere under the hood. The temperature gauge was climbing higher than normal, and I could smell something that might have been burning oil or coolant. I am not mechanically inclined, so I had no idea how to diagnose or fix whatever was wrong with my Honda Civic. The nearest town, according to my GPS, was still 40 miles away, but I spotted a small auto repair shop just a few miles ahead at an exit that seemed to lead to nothing but empty desert and a single building with a hand-painted sign that read Pete's Auto Repair. The shop looked like something from a different era. A small concrete building with 2 garage bays and a collection of old cars and trucks in various stages of disrepair scattered around the property. There was no town visible anywhere nearby, just this isolated business sitting beside a lonely highway exit in the middle of nowhere. A man emerged from one of the garage bays as I pulled into the gravel parking area. He was probably in his 50s with graying hair and hands stained with motor oil. He had the weathered appearance of someone who had spent his entire life working with his hands in the desert sun. "Looks like you might be having some trouble there, son," he said as I got out of my car. His voice had a friendly drawl and he seemed genuinely concerned about my situation. I explained the symptoms I had been experiencing, the grinding noise, the climbing temperature, and the burning smell. He listened carefully and nodded knowingly, like he had seen this type of problem many times before. "That sounds like it could be your water pump or maybe a bearing in the engine," he said. "Either way, you do not want to keep driving on it or you will end up with a seized engine and a much bigger problem. Let me take a look at it for you." His name was Pete Morrison, and he had been running this repair shop for over 20 years. He explained that he specialized in helping stranded travelers who encountered mechanical problems while crossing this isolated stretch of highway. According to him, the extreme heat and long distances between towns in this part of Texas created perfect conditions for automotive breakdowns. Pete seemed knowledgeable and trustworthy, so I agreed to let him diagnose the problem. He pulled my car into one of his garage bays and spent about 30 minutes examining the engine while I waited in his small office area. The office was cluttered with automotive manuals, invoices, and various car parts, but it felt authentic and lived in rather than suspicious. When Pete returned from examining my car, his expression was serious. I am afraid it is your water pump, just like I suspected. The bearing has failed, and if you keep driving, you are going to overheat the engine and cause permanent damage. The good news is that I have the parts to fix it. The bad news is that it is going to take me most of the day to complete the repair. I was disappointed by the delay, but I understood that automotive repairs take time, especially in a small shop with limited resources. Pete seemed honest and competent, and I did not have many alternatives given my location. There is a motel about 20 miles down the road where you can stay the night, Pete suggested. Or if you want to save some money, I have got a small apartment above the shop that I sometimes rent out to stranded travelers. It is nothing fancy, but it has a bed and a bathroom, and you would be right here when I finish the repair. The apartment option seemed convenient and economical, so I agreed to stay there overnight. Pete showed me up a narrow staircase to a small but clean living space above the garage. It had a bed, a small table and chair, a mini refrigerator, and a bathroom with a shower. The accommodations were basic but adequate for one night. Pete went to work on my car while I settled into the apartment and tried to get some work done on my laptop using my phone's data connection. I could hear him working below, the sounds of tools, an air compressor, and occasionally some music from a radio. Everything seemed normal and professional. It was when I went downstairs around 6 in the evening to check on his progress that I first noticed something disturbing. Pete was not in the garage with my car, so I walked around the building looking for him. I found him behind the shop, and he appeared to be burning something in a metal barrel. As I got closer, I could see that he was burning papers and what looked like personal items: wallets, purses, photographs, and identification cards. The smell was acrid and unpleasant, and Pete seemed startled when he realized I was watching him. "Just cleaning out some old paperwork and lost and found items," he explained quickly. "You know how it is. Stuff accumulates over the years and you have to dispose of it eventually." But as he spoke, I caught sight of something that made my blood run cold. Among the items he was burning, I could clearly see several driver's licenses with photographs of young people around my age. They looked recent, not like old lost and found items that had been accumulating for years. I tried to act casual and uninterested, but my mind was racing as I returned to the apartment. I began to think about how isolated this location was, how Pete had convinced me to stay overnight instead of going to a motel, and how convenient it was that he happened to have the exact parts needed to fix my car. I decided to investigate further while Pete was still occupied outside. I quietly made my way down to the garage and began looking around more carefully than I had before. In a toolbox near my car, I found a collection of car keys, dozens of them, far more than any legitimate repair shop would need. But the discovery that truly terrified me was hidden in a cabinet in Pete's office. Behind some automotive manuals, I found a shoebox containing driver's licenses, credit cards, and personal photographs of young people. There were at least 30 different identities represented, both male and female, all appearing to be college-aged travelers. The most chilling item in the box was a hand-drawn map showing locations in the desert where bodies could be disposed of. The map included detailed notes about soil conditions, accessibility, and distance from roads and hiking trails. I realized that Pete Morrison was not just a mechanic who helped stranded travelers. He was a predator who targeted young people traveling alone through this remote area. The isolated location of his shop was perfect for his purposes, and his mechanical expertise allowed him to create the very breakdowns that brought victims to him. My hands were shaking as I carefully returned everything to where I had found it and made my way back to the apartment as quietly as possible. I needed to escape immediately, but my car was partially disassembled and would not run. Pete had my keys and I was 20 miles from the nearest town with no transportation. I waited until after midnight when I could no longer hear any sounds from below, then quietly made my way back down to the garage. I searched through Pete's workspace until I found my car keys, then spent nearly an hour trying to reassemble enough of my engine to make the car drivable. I am not sure how I managed to get the water pump reconnected well enough to function temporarily, but desperation gave me mechanical abilities I did not know I possessed. I knew the repair would not last long, but I only needed to reach the next town and contact the police. I managed to start my car and drive out of Pete's garage without waking him. The engine was making terrible noises and the temperature was climbing rapidly, but I pushed it as hard as I could toward the distant lights of the nearest town. I made it to a truck stop just as my engine finally seized completely. The truckers there helped me contact the police, and within 2 hours a team of officers was on their way to Pete's auto repair. They found Pete Morrison attempting to flee in a pickup truck loaded with evidence of his crimes. The investigation revealed that he had been killing stranded travelers for over 15 years, using his isolated repair shop as the perfect hunting ground. The police recovered the remains of 23 victims buried at various locations in the desert. Pete had kept souvenirs from each of his victims, and his detailed records helped investigators solve missing persons cases dating back nearly 2 decades. Pete Morrison was eventually sentenced to death for his crimes, though he died in prison before his execution could be carried out. The case became known as the Highway Predator Murders and led to increased awareness about the vulnerabilities faced by solo travelers in remote areas. I still think about that night whenever I take long road trips. The experience taught me to trust my instincts when something feels wrong and to always inform others of my travel plans and expected arrival times. Most importantly, I learned that evil can hide behind a friendly face and a helpful demeanor, waiting patiently for the perfect opportunity to strike. The American highway system connects our vast country and enables incredible adventures, but it also creates opportunities for predators who understand how to exploit the trust and vulnerability of travelers in distress. We must remain vigilant and remember that sometimes the person offering help is actually the greatest danger we will ever encounter. My name is Rachel and I am from New York. What I am about to tell you happened 4 years ago during what was supposed to be a simple weekend getaway to Vermont with my best friend Lauren. This experience challenged everything I thought I knew about reality and the laws of physics. I am sharing this story because I believe there are places in our world where the normal rules do not apply, and travelers need to be aware that not every road on the map leads to where you think it will take you. Lauren and I had been friends since college, and we tried to take at least one weekend trip together each year to catch up and escape from our demanding jobs in Manhattan. That October, we decided to drive up to Vermont to see the fall foliage and spend a couple of days hiking and relaxing at a bed and breakfast in Stowe. We left the city on a Friday afternoon, planning to take our time and enjoy the scenic drive through upstate New York and into Vermont. Lauren had borrowed her boyfriend's SUV for the trip, and we were both excited about getting away from the urban chaos for a few days. The drive started perfectly. We made it through the worst of the city traffic and were soon cruising through the beautiful autumn landscape of the Hudson Valley. The leaves were at peak color, and we stopped several times to take photographs of the stunning scenery. It was around 6 in the evening when we encountered the construction zone that changed everything. We had been following Interstate 87 north when we came upon a series of orange signs indicating that the highway was closed ahead due to emergency bridge repairs. Traffic was being detoured onto a series of local roads that would eventually reconnect with the interstate about 30 miles north. The detour signs directed us off the highway and onto a state route that I had never heard of before. According to our GPS, this alternate route would add about 40 minutes to our journey, but it promised to take us through some beautiful countryside that we might not have seen otherwise. Lauren was driving and I was navigating using both the GPS and a paper road atlas that we had brought as backup. The state route we were following was well maintained and clearly marked, so we were not particularly concerned about getting lost. For the first 20 minutes, everything seemed normal. We passed through a small town with the typical Vermont architecture: white church steeples, covered bridges, and colonial houses with perfectly manicured lawns. The scenery was exactly what we had hoped to see on our fall foliage trip. But then something began to feel wrong. According to our GPS, we should have been approaching another small town. But instead, we found ourselves driving through an area that seemed increasingly remote and wild. The houses became fewer and farther between, and the forest pressed closer to the road on both sides. The first thing I noticed was the fog. It seemed to come out of nowhere, rolling across the road in thick gray waves that reduced our visibility to just a few yards. Lauren slowed down considerably, and we both started feeling uneasy about continuing forward. "This is weird," Lauren said, peering through the windshield at the swirling mist. The weather forecast did not mention anything about fog today. I checked our GPS again, but the screen was showing something impossible. According to the device, we were no longer on any recognized road. The display showed our position as a blinking dot in the middle of what appeared to be empty wilderness, with no roads or landmarks nearby. "That cannot be right," I said, trying to refresh the GPS signal. "We have been following the detour signs exactly." As we continued through the fog, we began to notice other strange things. The road signs we passed were written in languages that neither Lauren nor I recognized. They were definitely not in English, French, or any other language we had ever seen before. The symbols looked almost hieroglyphic, but they were clearly modern road signs with reflective surfaces and standard shapes. The mile markers were even more disturbing. Instead of normal numerical sequences, they seemed to be counting backwards, and the numbers themselves looked wrong somehow, like mathematical symbols from a different universe. "Rachel, look at this," Lauren said, pointing to a road sign ahead. "What does that say?" The sign appeared to be indicating a town or destination, but the name was written in those strange symbols we could not read. Below the unreadable text, however, there was something even more unsettling: a date that read 1847 in normal Arabic numerals. "Why would a modern road sign have a date from the 19th century on it?" I asked. But Lauren had no answer. As we drove deeper into the fog, we began to encounter other vehicles on the road, but they were not like any cars or trucks we had ever seen before. Some appeared to be horse-drawn carriages, while others looked like automobiles from different historical periods. Model T Fords, cars from the 1950s with massive tail fins, and vehicles that seemed futuristic in design. The most disturbing encounter came when we passed what appeared to be a family in a station wagon from the 1970s. The people inside looked normal enough, but as we drove by, they turned to stare at us with expressions of confusion and fear, as if our modern SUV was the strange and out-of-place vehicle. "Lauren, I think we need to turn around," I said, my voice betraying the panic I was beginning to feel. "This is not normal. None of this makes sense." But when Lauren tried to find a place to make a U-turn, we discovered that the road had somehow become a divided highway with concrete barriers preventing us from crossing to the other side. We had not seen any construction or warning signs indicating that the road configuration had changed, but we were now trapped traveling in one direction. The fog continued to thicken, and our visibility dropped to almost zero. Lauren was driving at barely 20 miles per hour, following the taillights of an old Packard that had materialized in front of us. The driver of the Packard seemed to know where he was going, so we decided to follow him rather than risk driving blind through the mist. It was then that we began to see the figures alongside the road. They appeared to be people, but they were translucent and seemed to be gesturing to us, trying to communicate something urgent. Some were dressed in clothing from different historical periods, while others wore what looked like accident victims, still wearing torn and bloody garments. One figure, a young woman in a 1960s-style dress, ran alongside our car for several hundred yards, pounding on Lauren's window and pointing frantically ahead of us. Her mouth was moving as if she were shouting something important, but we could not hear any sound. "They are trying to warn us about something," Lauren said, her knuckles white as she gripped the steering wheel. "I think we are in serious trouble." The ghostly figures became more numerous and more agitated the farther we traveled. They were all pointing in the same direction, towards something ahead of us on the road that we could not yet see through the fog. Suddenly, the Packard in front of us slammed on its brakes and swerved violently to the left. As the fog cleared for just a moment, we could see why. The road ahead simply ended, not at a bridge or intersection, but just stopped, as if someone had cut it off with a giant knife. Beyond where the pavement ended, there was nothing but empty space and clouds. Lauren hit the brakes hard, and our SUV skidded to a stop just yards from the edge of the road. We sat there in stunned silence, staring at the impossible sight before us. We were somehow driving on a highway that existed in midair, suspended over what appeared to be a vast canyon or void. The ghostly figures surrounded our car, and now we could see them clearly. They were all accident victims, people who had driven over that same edge and fallen to their deaths. They had been trying to warn us, to save us from joining their eternal vigil on this impossible road. One of the spirits, an elderly man in a suit from the 1940s, approached Lauren's window and placed his translucent hand on the glass. When he spoke, we could somehow hear his voice inside our heads rather than through our ears. "You must turn back," he said. "Follow the lights behind you. Do not look back once you start moving. This road does not belong in your time." Lauren managed to reverse the SUV and turn around, despite the concrete barriers that had somehow disappeared. As we drove back through the fog, following distant lights that seemed to be guiding us, the ghostly figures waved farewell and gradually faded from view. The fog began to lift, and the strange road signs changed back to normal English text. The mile markers returned to their proper sequence, and our GPS suddenly showed our correct location on a normal Vermont state highway. When we finally reached the interstate and continued to our destination, we tried to make sense of what had happened. We had somehow driven onto a highway that existed outside of normal space and time, a road that collected lost travelers from different historical periods and led them to their doom. We never found any record of the road we had traveled on that night. The detour signs that had led us there were gone when we returned home, and construction officials insisted that no emergency bridge repairs had been scheduled for that weekend. Lauren and I still take our annual trips together, but we never deviate from major highways, and we always travel during daylight hours. We learned that there are roads in this world that do not appear on any map. Highways that exist in the spaces between reality, where the lost and the dead continue their eternal journeys. Some detours lead to destinations that were never meant for the living. And sometimes the best navigation tool is the wisdom to turn around when the road ahead seems too strange to be real. The ghostly figures who saved us that night continue to watch over that impossible highway, warning other travelers before they too become permanent residents of a road that leads nowhere. My name is Robert, and I am from Arizona. I have been a long-haul trucker for over 15 years, and in that time I have seen and heard things that would make most people question their sanity. The incident I am going to describe happened 2 years ago during what should have been a routine delivery run from Phoenix to Chicago. This experience taught me that the CB radio can be both a lifeline and a trap, and that sometimes the voice asking for help on the airwaves belongs to someone who should never be trusted. I have always loved the freedom of the open road and the independence that comes with being a long-haul driver. There is something peaceful about driving through the night with nothing but the hum of the engine and the occasional chatter on the CB radio to keep you company. Over the years, I have made many friends through that radio, fellow drivers who look out for each other and share information about road conditions, weather, and places to stop for food and fuel. The CB radio culture among truckers is something special. We have our own language, our own code of ethics, and our own way of watching out for one another. When a driver is in trouble, whether it is a mechanical breakdown or a medical emergency, the trucking community rallies to help. That sense of brotherhood and mutual support is one of the things I love most about this profession. It was a Thursday evening in late November when I left Phoenix with a load of electronics bound for a distribution center outside Chicago. The weather forecast looked good, and I was planning to make the run in 3 days with overnight stops in Flagstaff and Kansas City. I had made this route dozens of times before, so I was not anticipating any problems. The first day went exactly as planned. I made good time across Arizona and into New Mexico, stopping only for fuel and the required rest breaks. As night fell, I was approaching Albuquerque when I first heard the voice that would change everything about my trip. Breaker 19, this is Lost Highway looking for any eastbound drivers who might be able to lend a hand, came a clear voice over Channel 19. The caller sounded like a middle-aged man and his tone suggested he was genuinely distressed about something. I keyed my microphone and responded, "This is Desert Eagle eastbound on I-40 near Albuquerque. What kind of help do you need, Lost Highway?" "Desert Eagle, thank God someone answered," he replied with obvious relief. "My rig broke down about 30 miles east of your position. Engine just quit on me completely and I do not have cell service out here. I have got a load of perishables that needs to get to Denver and I am running out of time." I have been in similar situations myself, so I understood his urgency. When you are hauling perishable goods, every hour counts and a breakdown can cost you thousands of dollars in spoiled merchandise. "What is your exact location, Lost Highway?" I asked. "I can call for a tow truck or mechanical assistance when I get to an area with better cell coverage." "I am at mile marker 267, pulled off on the shoulder just past the Moriarty exit," he responded. "There is a truck stop about 5 miles ahead where you could probably get some help. I would really appreciate anything you can do." I checked my atlas and confirmed that I would be passing his location in about 40 minutes. Mile marker 267 was indeed just past the Moriarty exit, in a stretch of highway that I knew was pretty desolate at night. I told Lost Highway that I would stop and see if there was anything I could do to help. As I approached mile marker 267, I slowed down and started looking for his disabled truck. The area was exactly as isolated as I had expected. Just empty desert on both sides of the highway with no buildings or other vehicles in sight. But I could not see any broken down truck on the shoulder. I keyed my CB radio again. "Lost Highway, this is Desert Eagle. I am at mile marker 267, but I do not see your rig. Are you sure about your location?" "Desert Eagle, I can see your headlights," came his immediate response. "I am pulled off about 200 yards ahead on your right. You should see me any second now." I continued driving slowly, scanning the shoulder for any sign of a disabled truck, but the highway remained empty. After another mile, I tried the radio again. "Lost Highway, I have passed mile marker 268 and I still do not see you. Can you flash your lights or give me some other landmark?" This time, his response was different. His voice was colder, more calculated. "Desert Eagle, why do not you take the next exit and double back? I am definitely here and I really need your help." Something about his tone made me uneasy. In 15 years of trucking, I had helped countless drivers in distress and they were always grateful and apologetic about the inconvenience. Lost Highway sounded too calm, too controlling. My instincts told me that something was not right about this situation. Instead of taking the next exit as he had suggested, I continued eastbound and got on the CB to see if any other drivers had heard from Lost Highway or seen his disabled truck. Breaker 19, this is Desert Eagle looking for any drivers who might have seen a breakdown near mile marker 267 westbound, I called out. The response I got chilled me to the bone. It came from a driver using the handle Roadmaster who sounded like an older, experienced trucker. Desert Eagle, you need to stay away from that area, Roadmaster said urgently. The voice you have been talking to does not belong to any stranded driver. There have been reports about that same call sign and similar distress calls for the past 6 months. 3 drivers have gone missing after responding to requests for help from someone using that handle. My blood ran cold as I processed what Roadmaster was telling me. Are you saying Lost Highway is not a real trucker in distress? Asked. That is exactly what I am saying, Roadmaster confirmed. The state police have been investigating a series of incidents where drivers have disappeared after receiving CB calls for help in remote areas. The MO is always the same. Someone claiming to be broken down in an isolated location asking for assistance, then luring Good Samaritans into a trap. As if he had been listening to our conversation, Lost Highway's voice came back on the radio, but now all pretense of being in distress was gone. Desert Eagle, I know you are still out there, he said with a voice that made my skin crawl. You passed right by me and now you are talking to other drivers about me. That was not very neighborly of you. The fact that he had been watching me drive by proved that he was indeed in the area but obviously not disabled or in need of help. I was dealing with someone who used the CB radio to hunt for victims among the trucking community. Roadmaster, I think this guy has been watching me, I radioed. He knows I drove past his supposed location and he is still trying to get me to come back. Get out of that area as fast as you can, Roadmaster advised. Contact the state police as soon as you have cell coverage and report the incident. This predator has been using our own communication system against us. Over the next several hours, as I continued toward my destination, other truckers joined the conversation on Channel 19. What I learned was terrifying. The person calling himself Lost Highway had been targeting long-haul drivers for months, using different variations of breakdown scenarios to lure them to remote locations. According to the information shared by other drivers, his method was to monitor CB traffic and identify solo drivers traveling through isolated areas late at night. He would then call for help using plausible scenarios, mechanical breakdowns, medical emergencies, or requests for directions that would appeal to the helpful nature of the trucking community. The 3 drivers who had disappeared were all experienced professionals who would normally be cautious about stopping in remote areas. But the CB radio created a false sense of security because they believed they were helping a fellow trucker in genuine distress. One driver, handle Mountain Man, shared that he had actually encountered Lost Highway in person 3 weeks earlier. He had responded to a similar distress call near Flagstaff and found a man standing beside what appeared to be a disabled pickup truck. But when Mountain Man offered to help, the man pulled out a weapon and demanded that Mountain Man get out of his truck. Mountain Man had managed to escape by driving away at high speed, but not before getting a good look at the perpetrator. He described him as a middle-aged white male with a scraggly beard, driving a dark-colored pickup truck with CB equipment that he used to impersonate stranded drivers. The state police eventually caught the man responsible for the Lost Highway incidents. His real name was Dale Kruger, and he was a former truck driver who had lost his commercial license after multiple DUI arrests. He had been using his knowledge of trucking culture and CB protocols to target drivers for robbery and worse. The investigation revealed that Kruger had murdered at least 2 of the missing drivers and seriously injured several others. He would use their CB radios and truck identification to continue his scam until the heat became too intense in one area. then move to a different state and start over. The case changed how many truckers use their CB radios. While the sense of community and mutual support remains strong, drivers are now more cautious about responding to calls for help in remote areas, especially from unfamiliar voices or call signs. I still use my CB radio every day, and I still believe in helping fellow drivers when they are genuinely in need. But the Lost Highway incident taught me that predators can exploit even the most positive aspects of human nature. Sometimes the voice asking for help belongs to someone who should never be trusted, and the road that leads to a fellow trucker in distress can actually lead straight into a trap. The highway remains a place where strangers help strangers survive the long, lonely miles between destinations. But we must remember that not everyone on the airwaves has honorable intentions, and sometimes the most dangerous predators are those who speak our language and know our culture well enough to use it against us. My name is Lisa, and I am from Washington. The experience I am about to share with you happened 3 years ago during one of the most emotionally devastating nights of my life. I was forced to drive through a stretch of highway that locals had warned me about for years. A road where travelers reported encounters with spirits who refused to rest. What happened to me that night changed my understanding of death, grief, and the unfinished business that can keep souls tethered to this world long after their bodies have given up. My younger brother Michael had been battling cancer for 2 years, and despite every treatment available, his condition had taken a sudden turn for the worse. I received the call from the hospital at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, telling me that Michael was not expected to survive until morning, and that I needed to come immediately if I wanted to say goodbye. The drive from Seattle to the small town of Centralia normally takes about 2 hours, but the most direct route includes a 15-mile stretch of Highway 12 that has an unsettling reputation among locals. This particular section of road winds through dense forest and crosses several old bridges, and for decades people have reported encounters with hitchhikers, phantom vehicles, and apparitions of accident victims who died along that route. Under normal circumstances, I would have taken a longer alternate route to avoid that notorious stretch of highway, especially late at night when most of the supernatural encounters reportedly occur. But with Michael dying, I could not afford to add an extra hour to my journey. Every minute counted, and I was willing to risk whatever supernatural experiences others had encountered if it meant reaching my brother's bedside while he was still alive. I left Seattle just after midnight, driving my Honda Accord through empty city streets and onto the interstate. The weather was typical for November in Washington, cold, damp, and foggy, with a light rain that made visibility challenging even with my windshield wipers running constantly. As I drove south, I tried to prepare myself emotionally for what I would find when I reached the hospital. Michael and I had always been close despite our 6-year age difference. When our parents divorced when I was 16, Michael and I became each other's primary source of stability and support. We had promised each other that we would always be there for each other no matter what challenges life brought our way. The thought of losing him was unbearable, but I knew that being present during his final moments was the most important thing I could do for him. It was around 1:30 in the morning when I reached the beginning of the haunted stretch of Highway 12. The fog had grown thicker as I left the interstate and entered the forested area, and my visibility was reduced to maybe 50 yards in any direction. The road was completely empty, no other vehicles in either direction, no roadside businesses, just dense woods and the occasional glimpse of old bridges and abandoned buildings through the mist. I was about 5 miles into this section when I first noticed the elderly woman in my passenger seat. She simply materialized beside me without any sound or warning, as if she had been there all along and I was just now noticing her presence. My initial reaction was startled surprise, but strangely I did not feel frightened or threatened by her appearance. The woman appeared to be in her 70s with silver hair pinned back in a neat bun and wearing a dark blue dress that looked like it was from the 1950s or 1960s. Her hands were folded in her lap, and she was staring straight ahead through the windshield with a peaceful expression on her face. She seemed completely solid and real, not translucent or ghostly like I would have expected from a supernatural encounter. "Good evening, dear," she said in a gentle voice that reminded me of my own grandmother. "I hope you do not mind the company. It gets quite lonely waiting by the roadside, and it has been such a long time since I have had someone to talk with." Despite the impossibility of the situation, I found myself responding naturally to her presence. "I do not mind at all," I replied, though I have to admit I was not expecting to pick up a passenger tonight. She smiled warmly and nodded. "I am sure this is quite surprising for you. My name is Dorothy, and I have been traveling this road for quite some time now, waiting for the right person to help me complete my journey." As we continued down the foggy highway, Dorothy began to tell me her story. She had lived in Centralia for most of her adult life, working as a nurse at the same hospital where my brother was currently dying. In 1962, she had been driving home from a late shift when her car had skidded on a patch of black ice and crashed into one of the bridge abutments along this stretch of highway. "I died instantly," she explained matter-of-factly, "but I never made it to where I was supposed to go next. I had made a promise to my grandson that I would be there when his time came, but I died before I could keep that promise. So I have been waiting on this road ever since, hoping to find someone who could help me reach him." I was beginning to understand why Dorothy had appeared in my car specifically. "Your grandson, is he at the hospital in Centralia?" I asked. "He is," she confirmed. "His name is Michael Patterson, and he is very sick. I promised him when he was a little boy that I would never leave him alone when he needed me most. Even death should not break a promise made to someone you love." My heart nearly stopped. Michael Patterson was my brother's full name, though he had always gone by Michael Davis after our mother remarried. But Patterson had been his original surname, our father's name before the divorce. "Dorothy, I think your grandson is my brother," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I am driving to the hospital right now because Michael is dying tonight." Dorothy turned to look at me directly for the first time, and I could see tears in her eyes. "Then you must be Lisa," she said. "Michael used to tell me stories about his big sister who always looked out for him. He said you were the strongest person he knew, and that he hoped he could be brave like you if he ever had to face something really difficult." I had never heard Michael mention a grandmother named Dorothy, but as she continued talking, I realized why. Dorothy had died when Michael was only 3 years old, too young to retain clear memories of her. But she had been there during his earliest years, caring for him while our mother worked, singing him to sleep and making the kind of promises that grandmothers make to children they love unconditionally. "He does not remember me," Dorothy said sadly. "But I have been watching over him his whole life, even though I could not be physically present. When I learned he was sick, I started waiting on this road, hoping someone would come along who could help me reach him in his final moments." As we approached Centralia, Dorothy began to fade, becoming more translucent with each passing mile, but her voice remained clear and comforting. "Tell Michael that Grandma Dorothy kept her promise," she said. "Tell him that he was never alone, not even when he felt scared or abandoned. I have been with him every step of the way, and I will be waiting for him when he is ready to let go." Dorothy disappeared completely just as I pulled into the hospital parking lot, but I could still feel her presence somehow, as if she was walking beside me as I hurried through the lobby and up to Michael's room. I found him awake and alert, despite what the doctors had told me about his condition. "Lisa, you made it," he said with a weak smile. "I was hoping I could hang on until you got here." I sat down beside his bed and took his hand. "Michael, I have a message for you from someone who loves you very much. Grandma Dorothy wants you to know that she kept her promise, and that you have never been alone." Michael's eyes widened with surprise and then filled with tears. "Grandma Dorothy? But how could you know about her? I barely remember her." "She has been watching over you your whole life," I explained. "She has been waiting for this moment so she could be here when you need her most." Over the next few hours, as Michael peacefully slipped away, I could sense Dorothy's presence in the room with us. She had finally completed her decades-long journey and fulfilled the promise she had made to a 3-year-old boy who needed to know he was loved. Michael passed away just before dawn, with a peaceful smile on his face and my hand holding his. The nurses said they had never seen someone transition so calmly, as if he was being welcomed by someone he trusted completely. I have driven that stretch of Highway 12 several times since Michael's death, but I have never again encountered Dorothy or any other supernatural presence. I believe she fulfilled her purpose and was finally able to move on to whatever comes after this life, knowing that she had kept her word to the little boy she loved. The experience taught me that love transcends death, and that the promises we make to each other can be powerful enough to keep us connected across impossible distances and years of separation. Sometimes the people who appear in our lives when we need them most are not coincidental encounters, but the fulfillment of promises made long ago by souls who refuse to abandon those they love.